I am slightly far beyond more than 200% sure that I am honest when I say this. Because I clearly have no idea what I am doing with myself, and I still don't even know what to do to this very day. Because I'm still petrified of what I have just witnessed before my very eyes. I didn't know where to begin at first before I even came up with that. I still need you here. It's highly recommended that you stick around. I want you to spread the word. As you can see, you are starting to wonder what I am doing with my life during this present day, and why I'm still so antisocial around my family and my real life friends. Well, here's the reason in case you want to know why I'm still traumatized because of a high school experience. About a month or so, maybe 2 months ago, I decided to get myself enrolled in a technical high school that has an animation class installed in the interior of the school. For that, my friends and I made the choice to take that particular class. You know, during my experience in school, I actually loved it. I loved it all. Classes were great. I learned a lot. I learned like a lot. And the classes were very enjoyable for someone at my age. Surprisingly, though, if I like the courses, even my friends who normally hate what I like them too. Well, it was my first time being in the animation class. So my classmates and I took our seats. The prof walked in, and he looked like he wasn't the nicest guy. Although he looked quite the opposite in appearance, but personality-wise, he was in fact actually very nice. He had a bald head, a pair of nerdy glasses, white suit, black and red striped tie, long black pants. I still remember those black, shiny shoes of his. Once he made his way over to his desk, he stood there while crossing his arms behind his back with a firm look on his face. The first thing he said to us was, "So, is this your first day of school?" "I see. This class requires no books, but we are going to learn all about animation. If you have watched animated franchises of your interest, then I'm going to give you an assignment. You're going to create your very own animation of whatever you desire to make it the creative way that you choose, original or not." There was no response from my classmates or even from me. Assuming that we all understood, he continued to speak to us in the same calm manner that he has been speaking to us before, and we were all ears. "Before you start, I want all of you to obey the guidelines of this classroom. No explicit, violent, or graphic material, no lollygagging, no gross-out humor, no cartoon crossovers, and no stealing content that isn't yours and claiming ownership over it. Any student, and I mean any student, who breaks one of these rules will automatically get an F on their project. Obey these guidelines and you will get an A on your project. Am I understood, class?" We quietly said yes. "Good. Now get on your computers and start animating. I will leave you all unsupervised for now, and by the time I get back, there better not be any nonsense. Am I clear?" We once again agreed. After that, he left the classroom and slammed the door shut. Everyone got busy and got on their computers, well, with the exception of me. All I did was just sit there like I had no clue of what I was even supposed to do. That was until someone decided to help me and become my friend after my clueless, puzzled, bewildered self just sat there for at least half a minute, darting my head from left to right at the other classmates as they got onto their computers, but me, not so much. So this guy's name was Nathan, and he seemed like a really nice guy when I looked at him. Now, looking back at him, he's a very helpful person. I mean, he'd used some of our classmates as voice actors for his animation, so. "Need help, buddy? Come on, I'll show you what I have so far. It's our animation after all. Am I right, or am I right?" he said. When I followed him, I found myself next door with a few kids whose names I don't even recall, just sitting there in their own seats with a mic in front of each of them. The first person was male, younger than the other, and the other person was female, slightly older. When they noticed me, they slightly smiled at me in a warm, welcoming manner, as if they were happy to see me. So I smiled back, waved at the both of them before following Nathan over to a desk that had a computer on it. Had all the usuals: cables, wires, cords, plugs, all perfectly plugged in with one another. The school must have had money. Nathan motioned me to sit down in a chair that was in front of the other one with him, and the two of us began a conversation. The first person out of the two of us was Nathan. I'm rather quiet. With a friendly smile, he nudged me with his shoulder playfully while winking. So how's about you tell me your name? I'm Nathan, an animator and an artist. Hoo-hoo, boy, trust and believe, friend. You're going to like me, I promise you. Come on, don't be shy. Just tell me your name. Well, that made me a little uncomfortable. I backed away slightly and faced away from the kid, and being as quiet as I am, I said, I'm Stan, I said quietly. What was that? Nathan asked, and this time only a little louder. I said my name again. I'm Stan. Stan. Not too shabby of a name. If you're attending an animation class and you don't know what to do, then I'm the guy to help you. Say, if you don't have any clue how to animate, then I'll be the one doing it for you. Now, that doesn't seem like I'm all just too kind, right? Nathan lounged in his chair with a grin on his face that I suppose wasn't, to look mean or anything. He was trying to be my friend, but on the other hand, I didn't know how to dignify that as a response. I just sat there, quivering slightly the whole time. Nathan raised a brow at me like I was some kind of lunatic. His smile was gone, and he asked me what was wrong. Now, if I didn't tell you before, I suffer from Asperger's syndrome, and I'm highly timid. I still am today, but I have improved a whole lot as time has passed by. What's up with you? Is everything okay, Stan? Nathan asked me in a concerned manner. He glared at me in a non-menacing way, but menacing or not, this made me even more nervous. Yes? I said to Nathan, making him put his smile back on his face. Excellent, Nathan blurted a little. It's going to be a surprise, so if you have any questions, you can ask one right now, and I'll gladly answer it for you. Huh. I put my index finger and my thumb on my chin and thought for a moment. Maybe 10, 15 seconds later, I came up with the best kind of response that I could think of. What's the animation going to be about? Nathan chuckled quietly before he opened his pie hole and answered my question. He was so loud that I feared even the prof would be able to hear him, despite him being, well, may as well have been miles away from there. Good question, Stan. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I'm going to give you just the hint you need, he blabbered. And that is, I muttered, really under my breath, but Nathan was able to hear my mumbles. If you want to know what it is, then you can solve this riddle. It's about two bunnies that share friendship, kindness, and love with their friends. One is a troublemaker, and the other one is the kind who takes care of the little bunny. It's a Sunshine television program that you love oh so dearly, and it's been watched by tons. What is this show called? Man, was he happy. Acting as if I had no clue what it was, I turned around to look at the voice actors of whoever they were voicing in their animation. Looking at the male voice actor, he was shorter and younger, and the female voice actor was taller and older. That's when I suddenly had a clue. I figured out what the answer to his riddle was. Well, it might have been 3 or 4 minutes of struggling to solve the riddle, but it came to me. Remember Nick Jr.? The answer to that question is probably obvious to you if you do, but let's just say it was meant to be rhetorical. When I was little, I'd watch Nick Jr. before my teenage years had come to me. One of those very shows I'd watch was Max and Ruby, and in fact, this Sunshine show is about two bunnies that go around spreading love and kindness with each other. And corny as that. Well, I suppose that you think that Max and Ruby is not the case, but trust me, it is. In a retrospect, Nathan made an episode of Max and Ruby of his very own, which I'll get into that later on because I want to tell you the full story. I always wished to in the very beginning before I started telling anyone about this. Anyway, back to his riddle. I answered and I said, "Is it Max and Ruby?" I looked away for a second before turning face to my friend again. "Well, now, it seems that you finally figured it out, my friend. As you can see, Stan, I'm making an episode of Max and Ruby of my very own. I won't spoil the whole episode for you because I know how much people just hate spoilers. You dig?" Nathan glimmered, nudging me with his shoulder as he did before. "Don't you worry your head off, Stan. I'll produce the episode, starting right about, shall we say, now." Nathan motioned me to hop on a computer, and as I did, he didn't tell me anything about my role for the episode's production sequence. I logged onto the computer, started to browse, and every now and then I turned my head to see Nathan drawing, animating, composing background music, using voice actors to narrate Max Bunny and Ruby Bunny. And by looking at Nathan, he looked as if he was having a whole lot of fun making the episode. Wait, no, you know what? Having fun is a little bit of an understatement. He looked as if he was having an absolute blast. Well, I looked at him and the voice actors whose names I don't remember. I turned my head back to the computer and continued to browse and watch YouTube videos. I had nothing else to do. Oh, it must have been 2 or even 3 hours of browsing the internet. I figured there was time for me to log off the computer and check up on Nathan. Now, proceed to do so and so, this and that. Well, I stood up finally and I checked on him. The voice actors stopped narrating Max and Ruby Bunny and Nathan was done with his animation. Are you finished with your animation, Nathan?" Nathan turned around and he had his arms crossed behind his back. He did not look as jolly as he did before. In fact, he actually looked a little bit professional. He had what appeared to be a smug grin on his face, but I assume he did look a little more calm than he had before. "Oh, why, sure I am, Stan. I won't let you see it yet, but..." He paused. I stepped back slightly, but I kept my balance and my eyes on Nathan. "I'll show you my project tomorrow afternoon, and then to the whole class when the prof says we can show our animations." Nathan finished his sentence, and I accepted his terms. I nodded. I agreed. "Splendid! Catch you on the flight side, Stan." Nathan spoke one more time as he and the voice actors made his way out of the animation room, leaving me as the only person in the room. Well, I seemed alone at this rate. The lights suddenly turned off, but the only things that remained active were a few lamps. Generic lamps, well, some were unique. Lava lamps, LED light lamps. Again, I think the school had money. The dull, generic lamps flickered repeatedly as if they were about to die off at any moment. Impressively, though, they were still alive and kicking. I made my move to check out what kind of episode of Max and Ruby Nathan had made. I got onto the computer that he had used, and being, well, I guess tech-savvy, I made sure that I didn't spoil myself for the episode. All I wanted to do was to find out what the title was going to be. That was all. As soon as I got into the system that Nathan used for animating, as assigned by the prof, I saw text on the screen. Well, that was what I was looking for, right? On the top center of the screen, it read, "Ruby's Afternoon Snack." Below the title was a play button in the center of what appeared to be the episode. The thumbnail appeared to be the interior of Max and Ruby's house where the kitchen was located. On the table was a few sandwiches separated individually on small plates. Okay, that all makes sense. No characters were present at the time, so I actually got bored and I got off the computer. Fortunately for me, at least I found what I was looking for, so hey. I stood up, made my way out of the room, opened the door, stepped foot outside of the room, slowly closed the door right behind myself. So here's the thing. I could have watched the episode, but I didn't want to because I just had this feeling that Nathan could walk into the room at any second. I didn't want to become concerned with my actions. He told me he'd show it to me tomorrow afternoon before showing it to the whole class, and, I made a promise. When I got out of the room, I suddenly noticed Nathan and the voice actors in a private chat in the professor's classroom with no one else other than them being present. I was afraid. I hid as quickly as I could before Nathan could even see me. Funny thing is, I didn't want this weirdo to ask me where I was the whole time. If I were to be caught by him, I'd have to lie. That's why I wasn't going to enter the risk of not being able to see the episode, and I didn't want to lose a friend. Now, I'm not an idiot, but I will say that I didn't even watch it before the day the prof and I watched the episode. While I was hiding, I was overhearing what the trio was having a conversation about. But I don't know all of it. It's been a month or two since I've told you this. Here was what I thought I heard. Nathan, you fellas did a great job with the voice acting. Maybe next time when the professor says we're going to make another animation, you can take it from here. Male voice actor. Honestly to say, Nate, I kind of had fun with narrating Max screaming while being eaten alive. Female voice actor. You made Ruby look like she was insane, and I'm sure that you can keep making more animations like this one. Oh, that was all I could remember. When I heard something about Max screaming while being devoured and Ruby becoming downright insane, well, curiosity got the better of me. As curious as ever. Oh boy. Oh boy. I had to ask the professor if we could watch Nathan's animation, but of course with his permission. This time I was able to come out of my hiding place and look for the prof. Nathan and the voice actors had left the classroom to do, who knows what else they were up to by now. I snuck out of the classroom, made my way down a hallway, proceeded to search for the professor. I walked and walked, looked left and right, around the studentless hallways, and the first thing that came to mind was trying the conference room. Well, as soon as I got there, the results were just horrid. There was nobody present. However, I corrected myself when I thought in my head that the professor hasn't even had his first meeting. I thought I had the answer, that I had the idea. He could be in a teacher's lounge or something. I made a turn. I made my way over to where the teacher's lounge was, or, well, whatever. I politely knocked on the door and called the professor's name. Through the glass, I could see the professor get up off the sofa and turn the door handle. As the professor opened the door, he saw me jabbing both index fingers together like jackhammers, having each of their own seizures. Stanley, if you're here to talk to me, please make it important. He had a stern look on his face. He crossed his arms and awaited my acknowledgement with the most patience he could ever hold. I was wondering if I could watch Nathan's animation with you before we present ours. I shyly asked the tall, bald man, slowly stepping back from him. You seem to be giving me the idea to add that as a new rule to the guidelines. Well, you know what? Very well. If you want the two of us to watch the animated project, ask the original owner of the project for his permission. I'll give you 10 minutes to ask Nathan and report back to me so I can make a disc of the project. I nodded my head. I understood. Good. Go now. I'll be waiting in the lounge. Again, you have 10 minutes. Be back and quick as a bunny, Stanley. Bunny? That was odd. I nodded, and the professor went back into the room and shut the door behind himself and sat back down on the sofa. I made my way down the hallway to find Nathan, but I didn't know where he was. I had a time limit to ask him if I could watch his project. Well, okay, I lied. I also lied when I said I didn't watch it early. The best lie I have ever thought of was about the prof sending me down to ask him if he could watch the project himself. So it worked. It worked as soon as I found him. He was in the back room of the professor's classroom with the voice actors talking about something. I had the thought to interrupt the conversation. I approached the trio, got closer and closer. The female voice actor caught up with me. She got Nathan's attention. Nathan shot his head up, looked at me. I stopped dead in my tracks from the inside. I froze, right where I was. Stan, what are you doing here? Did you come to talk to me? 'Cause I sure did miss you after all. Nathan beamed, now making a large grin on his face that spread a little, and by that he was starting to creep me out. I took a deep breath and exhaled before talking to my friend. Nathan, I have something to tell you, and it's very important. Nathan looked at me and raised a brow, and he lost the smile he had on his face. Uh-huh. I'm listening. Nathan sat down in a chair while I just stood right where I was. I was sent down by the professor to tell you if you could watch your project. Nathan thought for a moment. It was quite obvious. It was quite obvious, so I'm just going to tell you that he said yes. We shook hands. I went back to the teacher's lounge to find the professor. Well, I did tell you that I made a promise not to watch it before the professor did. I didn't lie about that part, right? As soon as I got there, the prof was still sitting on the sofa, casually. I knocked on the door, but the prof just looked at me through the glass and motioned me to walk inside. Did you ask Nathan if we could watch his project, Stanley? He asked. I nodded my head. I showed him the DVD case. If you want to know what the DVD case looks like, I'll just describe it in a few words. It wasn't really exciting. There was nothing but white, except for handwriting in black marker that read, Nathan's Project. My professor raised an eyebrow, held his hand out, and motioned me to hand it to him. Handed the case over, told me to follow him to the back of the classroom. Turned on the Epson interactive whiteboard. I pulled a black swivel chair over in front of the board, planted myself on the seat. Over to my left was the prof at his desk, placing the disk into his computer's optical disk drive and closing the tray. I turned my head to the whiteboard to see that the file folder automatically opened by itself to reveal something in quick access folder. Rubies_afternoon_snack.avi. There you are. Come to Papa, I thought to myself. The file automatically full-screened itself after the prof double-clicked the file and went into Windows Movie Maker, showing a blank screen for a second before revealing the opening sequence to Max and Ruby. My professor was puzzled. The video was 8 minutes long as a normal Max and Ruby episode. However, as soon as the intro ended where Max and his sister waved at the camera from the window, as the children in the background said the title and giggled, they just stayed there for a moment before Ruby slowly moved her irises over to Max, and her eyes locked onto Max's without even blinking, her smile still remaining. Max was oblivious of the way Ruby was staring at him as he and his sister continued waving at the screen as if this had been an animation error. What in the name of... my prof mumbled. The screen faded into the episode title card. It featured Ruby in the house, and on the top right, Max was playing with his toys. Ruby had a devious expression on her face. She was licking her chops, and her eyes were looking over to where Max was, while back-facing. The title displayed in a dark blue color. In the background, Ruby exclaimed the title of the episode in her trademark sweet voice, the way she's always been talking to Max. Ruby's afternoon snack, she chimed. Started to feel a little suspicious to me. The title card faded out to open up the episode. The opening circle revealed the very beginning. It began with Ruby making what appeared to be a tea party with her dolls as she sat them down individually in each of their own chairs. She made her way over to a shelf to pick up some plastic teacups and a teapot, all of them colored in pink, with a white shape pattern all painted on each and every one of them. Ruby placed the teacups on small pink plastic plates and set them individually in front of the dolls that were sitting in the chairs. She was humming, pouring imaginary tea into the fake teacups using the plastic teapot. She sat at the small round table pretending to sip tea, and as she did, the camera panned over to Max in the living room playing with his toys. He eventually got bored and went upstairs to check on Ruby. Max peered through the door before slowly opening it and stepped foot into her room unnoticed. He had his trademark smug expression and proceeded to make a move. He made his way over to the table before proceeding to vandalize the tea party, taking off Curly Shirley's wig and putting it on Pinocchio and folding the Rapunzel doll's dress over its head. Max giggled quietly before sneaking out of Ruby's bedroom to play with his toys. When Ruby turned back to the table, she noticed that her dolls were no longer where they were supposed to be. Now, obviously, she knew this was Max's doing. Without further hesitation, she shuffled out the door and downstairs to find Max. Max, she called her brother. Max giggled before grinning and making his way out the back door. He dropped a banana peel on the grass, and as Ruby ran outside, she slipped and fell when she planted her right foot on it. Max giggled again before running over to Ruby's garden to make one of his nauseating worm cakes. He picked up a heap of mud and worms before running inside the house and upstairs to his sister's room. And when he did, he took off chunks of the worm cake, opened the plastic teapot, and dumped all of them into the teapot before running out to hide in the bathroom, giggling his fluffy butt off. The camera would pan over to Ruby, now in the hallway, looking for Max. Max! Max, where are you? Ruby searched door to door, room to room. The last place she checked was Max's room, yet he wasn't there. I have to admit, this animation was rather impressive. It was drawn, animated, and narrated just like the actual show. Ruby searched around Max's room, looking under his covers, under his bed, checking his closet, everything. Max, where in the world are you? Ruby said with a mix of anger and anxiousness in her voice. The camera cut to Max in the bathroom as he was hiding in the bathtub. He barely even moved an inch, making the scene a little bit concerning. The scene zoomed in on Max's face, and he appeared to have lost the grin. Instead, he had a little bit of guilt plaster on his face before the scene transitioned over to Ruby, making her way to the kitchen to make lunch. If looking for him doesn't work, then I suppose making lunch for him will. Ruby proceeds to open the fridge, and when she does, she grabs the bread, a sliced tomato, some lettuce, slices of ham and cheese, a ketchup bottle, and a mustard bottle. She makes 2 sandwiches for herself and her brother. Max, come downstairs. It's lunchtime, Ruby called to her brother. The screen cut to show Max's face, now with a smile on it. He ran out of the bathroom and made his way downstairs into the kitchen. Once there, he was greeted with his sister, who watched him walk over to the dining room table and sit down. When Max sat down, Ruby sat in front of Max, picked up her sandwich, took the first bite. Max looked at Ruby, and the next thing he knew when he arrived at the dining room was Ruby looking at him funny. Max tilted his head slightly at his sister, and since he was usually nonverbal, he took his first bites of his sandwich. Ruby started to speak to her brother, still in the sweet and calm way she talks to other bunnies. Max, I just want to know why you have barged into my room behind my back and messed with my dolls. Is there a reason why you did? Max, despite the fact that he was an infant, responded to his sister with his usual 1 or 2 worded dialogue. Tea party, Max replied, still eating his sandwich. No, Max, you can't join my tea party because you always mess things up whenever I let you play with me. Ruby clarifies, now lecturing Max in the same voice she uses whenever she lectures Max. When you get done eating, go straight over to the living room and just go play with your toys. Do you understand, Max? Max just glared at her and slowly nodded and took his final bite of his sandwich. He stepped down from his chair and did what he was told by his older sister. He opened the toy box and started to play with his toys. Well, I thought this was actually kind of pedestrian for what I had overheard earlier, but then the final 4 minutes of the episode happened. Now, the last 4 minutes played out with Max going into the living room to play with his toys. And while he was, the camera panned over to Ruby, now with the same sinister expression she had on her face, locking her eyes onto her brother's while facing away from him. She licked her lips slowly, and things were starting to become intense. Well, then they became straight up dark and traumatizing. Ruby went upstairs to her room to continue her tea party. When she got there, she'd noticed some dirt falling down from the spout of the teapot. What the? Ruby mumbled under her breath as she made her way over to the teapot. Once she opened the cap, she found dirt and worms from inside. The worms were wiggling around the dirt clumps. When Ruby saw the worm cake chunks that remained in her teapot, she squealed in horror and immediately put the cap back on the teapot in a flash. Her fearful reaction turned more so into an angry one. She balled up her fists, raised them up, and she started to shake and growl viciously. He's going to get it. He will get it today. I don't know when. I don't know how I will do it, but he will get it. Ruby hissed under an intimidating, soft-spoken voice. That was when I heard a loud growl coming from Ruby's stomach. She looked at her gut, and then she looked right back at the camera, at me, and slowly formed a demented grin. I'm hungry. Oh, boy. I was creeped out. The professor was creeped out. The scene faded out to show Max playing with his toys, getting bored. He didn't have anything else to do. He started to wander around the house and cause trouble. That didn't work. He got more bored. The camera panned over to the stairs, and Max walked upstairs to the second story to check up on his older sister. He approached the door to Ruby's bedroom. There was no music in the background. This was more than a little bit freaky to me. When he got there, he saw his sister standing still next to her tea party table, her back facing away. He slowly approached his sister. When he got close enough, he tugged on her skirt, wondering if she was okay. Then Ruby turned around very slowly and looked down at her younger brother with the same grin from the previous scene. The way Ruby was looking at Max was just wrong. Her smile got more crooked, possessive. Her ears were drooping down the sides of her head. What's wrong, Max? Don't you want a hug from your big sister? Max stepped back, and what was heard was a faint whimper from him. Ruby was slowly walking over to him, and she was licking her chops in a freaky manner. As Ruby was slowly approaching Max was backing away from his sister. He backed away to the door to Ruby's room, and Ruby just kept approaching him, and her arms were barely moving an inch. Max, now developing a non-irrational fear of his sister, turned his back and ran over to the door. He opened the door and stepped out. When he looked back into the bedroom, Ruby was charging at him. They got a loud scream. He slammed the door to his sister's bedroom, and the camera cut to Ruby in her bedroom for a brief moment. She ran into the door, followed by a grunt from her. The camera panned over to Max, trying to find the nearest exit. He looked left and right in the corner of his eye, he saw the front door. When he approached it, he tried to turn the knob and open it, but it wouldn't budge. He looked at the door that led into the garden, and when he ran over to the sliding door leading into the garden, he tried to open the sliding door and find an alternate way to escape, but that didn't work. That didn't work either. And that was when he heard Ruby's footsteps, and he saw her shadow coming from the stairs. The screen cut to show Max with an expression on his face. An expression that demonstrated confusion, delirium, the fear of his life. He was alert. He was looking left and right for a place to hide. Ruby's heavy breathing was heard as she made her way down the stairs. Max had no choice but to react quickly and find the nearest hiding place, because Ruby almost reached the floor. Come on, come here, Max. I won't hurt you. Max crawled under the sofa immediately when Ruby was stepping down the second to last of the stairs. The screen cut to a first-person view of Max under the sofa. Outside of the sofa was Ruby, searching around for Max, but her full body wasn't seen. The only parts on Ruby that could be seen was her feet. She was pacing and pacing and pacing, over and over and over. I'd already thought that Max would survive this dreadful day, and me and my foolish self, I just wanted to see how it ended. But then the final 2 minutes are why, as I said, my high school experience was traumatizing. When Ruby was going to leave the house, as I said before, Max let out a sigh of relief when his sister planned to go out to the garden. Ruby stopped dead in her tracks and she immediately shot her head back. She slowly turned around and she walked over to the sofa in the slowest manner I could conceive. As Ruby made a turn, the camera followed her as she made her way over to it. Over to the sofa. She looked under it and found her brother, hiding under the darkness. "There you are, Max. I was looking all over for you. Are you going to come out so you can join my tea party?" Max looked at her and noticed Ruby didn't look as savage as she was earlier. He didn't seem to be afraid anymore. Ruby slowly reached her arm out to Max, and Max did the same. Ruby pulled him out from under the sofa. Ruby now looking Max in the eye with a giant grin on her face. Well, here we go. Distorted music started trailing in the background. Ruby began to open her mouth. Max's ears drooped, his eyes widened, his pupils shrank. Before he could let out a scream, Ruby shoved his head into her mouth and began from Max's head to his shoulders. A loud, screeching noise accompanied the messed up music. Ruby shoved her brother down her throat. Seizure-inducing lights started to flash rapidly. Max's echoing screams could finally be heard as Ruby lifted her brother up with her mouth, gulping him further into her esophagus. "Oh my God," the prof said. "And speak of the devil, that's what I wanted to say too." Just about the last minute of the episode, Max's feet were the only things left. They were no longer seen when Ruby had completely swallowed him whole. The distorted music and the screeching faded out. Ruby made her way upstairs and went down the hallway to her bedroom. She sighed, entered her bedroom, slammed the door shut, and the episode concluded. Closing circle enshrouded the episode into a black screen before a gunshot was heard, I don't even know why, and cut to the ending credits of the episode. After a few seconds of the credits played out, my professor paused it and he would stay silent for a moment before looking right at me. I was in just a complete panic attack. All I did was sit there. I shivered, I cried, I couldn't speak. I didn't reply to anything my professor said. "Stanley, you stay right where you are. You aren't in trouble, but Nathan is, and I will be giving him a serious talking to." The only reply I could make was a trauma whisper. The professor angrily stormed out of the classroom and slammed the door shut. I just cried like a little softy. I didn't know what was going on. I'm sure Nathan received the lecture of his life. Just a few minutes later, the professor walked into the classroom, dragging Nathan by the arm in a way that could pop his arm right out of his socket. The professor furiously dragged Nathan into the animation room and shut the door. And behind that door, I could hear the prof yelling at the top of his voice at Nathan, the angriest way I'd ever heard it. "I don't understand, Professor. What's wrong with my animation?" Nathan asked. Everything! Everything was wrong with it! Have you ever listened to the simple to understand guidelines I gave the entire class? Everything would have went fine if you were to follow these simple instructions. But no, you chose not to listen, and thus this rewards you with an F minus on your project. I had heard my previously very, very calm professor hiss at Nathan, and the conversation went on and on and on. The professor escorted Nathan to the principal's office. I didn't watch Nathan. I didn't look at him. I didn't talk to him. He didn't look at me. In fact, afterwards, it must have been a good few months before I started talking to him again. He was the biggest weirdo I'd ever met. Some friend. I explained to the professor I had no clue how to animate, and as a response, he worked with me and helped me with the animation. That is, it was poorly designed. He thought it was good. I eventually got an A plus on the project when it was time to present ours. I don't know what happened to Nathan. I think he might have been suspended or had after school detention, but this wasn't the case. You know, I'm really wondering if we're still friends in a way. If he ever hears this, I actually don't want the friendship to end. I actually want to be friends with him. Even though we haven't talked in a while. I know that might sound weird, but all I know is he unenrolled from the animation class, and I didn't see him again for the rest of school. So academically, things were fine. I kept getting A's and B's in my classes, but Nathan, from what I was told, didn't. I overheard that he kept failing and failing and failing. I know you might think I'm a soft kid, but I think he might have had a mental disorder. Nathan didn't ride on the same bus as I did anymore. Hmm. You know, Nathan's personality changed gradually. Hadn't been as social or friendly to other people or even to me. He was a nice guy, but he became a school bully. Constantly torture other kids, even older than me, younger than me, even my age. It didn't matter. He even attacked the prof. He demanded to let him back into the animation class, and he made some violent threats. He was sent to the principal's office again, and, well, I heard from one source that he was expelled from school and couldn't even come back, but who knows? Well, maybe that's the truth, because the last time I do remember seeing my, I guess, former friend, he was forlornly sitting outside the front of the school waiting for his parents to pick him up. The guy was a total weirdo. I really hope the best for him, the best kind of help he could get. But you know, maybe I don't want him to be my friend. I don't even know. But what I do know is that since then I learned a ton about animation, and my professor really helped me. In fact, I made the animation class my homeroom. My homeroom teacher, my animation professor, and I just kept animating and animating. And in fact, even my parents were impressed of how much I improved. Animation's really hard to learn. It takes a lot of practice, but got that A for my effort and my participation. Even though my childhood was ruined by my friend, Max and Ruby isn't gone from my mind. It's going to take way more than that to ruin it for me. I still remember the days, the happy times, when I watched the show when I was a small child. I thought a lot about what I was going to tell you before I started telling you this. In fact, to come clean, it was about 7 weeks thinking about all this, trying to phrase this the right way. If you have any questions, you know what, just ask me. I'll answer them as soon as I can. I'll do it happily. Just ask me whatever. I'll be all ears. I'll answer them at the soonest moment possible. If you have a question, just ask.